A 60mg 5-MeO DMT trip report, sent in by a subscriber, Calais Banan. Thank you so much for sending this in, really loved your report and I think you guys are going to love it too, so let's get stuck into it. Writing or attempting to describe this substance is very challenging, so there'll be some metaphors. This is however the best thing that's happened to me, despite what I went through during this brief trip. The first dose was about 10 to 15 milligrams smoked in the cigarette. We opened a window and I lit up with small crystals of 5-MeO DMT interlaced within the tip of the smoke. I took a first, very deep drag and felt the harsh vapour rush down my body through my throat and deep into my lungs, as a flavour of burnt electronics dominated. I held the smoke inside for about 5 to 6 seconds, and in the same moment I started to feel like my body weighed down onto my legs like lead, but that I could jump up and absolutely take off at the same time. My vision started to curl up and fold onto itself, as if a pillar of warm air had started to rise along me, dragging me upwards towards something beyond the sky. Now something began to detonate in my head, except very slowly, and for the first time in my life I understood that what all this nonsense about the ego meant, and now it was going to be destroyed. After about 2 seconds, I couldn't muster any more strength to hold the smoke inside my lungs anymore, although it felt like much longer. I collapsed on my couch, but couldn't tell if it was made out of rock or air. As the last pieces of me started to scatter outwards and ascend, I managed my last toke and felt the world violently spaghettify upwards. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like the next beat came before the first one had been. My ego was no more. It was impossible to think. I, as a concept, had been forgotten. Pain, serenity, love, hate, anger, joy. Everything came as waves from my stomach and upwards, through my head, even further beyond where I now was. The feelings were meaningless, because me, my ego, didn't exist. I just was. I felt literal waves of emotion crashing on my body, and a sense of drowning entered me. After a couple minutes of reality time, everything was over and my ego was back in one piece. I had large amounts of vomit in my throat and running down my body, and I was feeling very light. This could have been it, but I was granted a second chance and miraculously avoided asphyxiating without the aid of my incapacitated friends. As I was washing myself in the bathroom, I could have finished the trip there and go back to my normal life. But, in a fashion very opposed to my normal, meek psychological disposition, it felt like settling for less. I had to go back up again, and as I decided to snort a line of about 30 to 40 mg, my fate was sealed. There was no turning back now. It was easier to snort it than I had anticipated. It burnt slightly, but I had read previously that it would be way more painful. I went to the bedroom and lay down on the bed. The burning sensation, however, didn't subside. It grew continuously, like an elevator descending excruciatingly slowly to ridiculous levels that felt like an evil comedy, like it was some kind of joke. I still simply cannot fathom what kind of deranged lunatic could be the architect of a sensation like this. This pain, it's some kind of cheap trick, it's simply not possible, I thought, until I realised, oh my god, it really is though. I'm actually in hell. I was now only me. Everything negative that I had suppressed, all the shame, all the pain I had swept under the rug without working through, attacked me. You could compare it to a naked man armed only with a water noodle standing before a charging million-men-sized army of Spartans. But despite that, you would be immortal, so you could not escape this cruel reality. It went on for so long and so relentlessly that I felt like normal reality was just a thin shell that I'd clung to my whole life, which existed upon what I was now experiencing. Like a bastion of water in a horrifying sea of scorching hot sand that I had now been flung out into, and was now in a crawl of shame attempting to make my way back to my little pretend land. Simultaneously, an unrelenting laugh track of my memories were playing over my precarious situation, with visions of cacophonous arrangements of infinite people, twisting and turning in absolute stunning delight, and laughter over my endless suffering, while mutilating and raping my entrails, which they stretched out from my body over and beyond the horizon. The sentence, "I'm actually in hell," didn't mean that I had entered hell. To me it meant I had always been in hell, and that it was everything that has or will ever exist. My friends, which had snorted about 30 milligrams each, were talking next to me. I felt alone and forgotten. I had only a small glimmer of hope, and it was a tiny little part of me that told me, face them and fight. I didn't understand that thought, but it gave me feelings of hope that this would all soon be over, but would have to fight the army before me. It represented all my wounds that I'd been carrying. It was me and them. I was laying there, feeling like I was dying. My friends later told me that it looked like I was peacefully contemplating, and they let me be during my experience. But for me, there was no such thing, only pain. It was now I heard my friend who had also taken 5-MeO DMT with me tell my friends, "Oh, love. Everything is love. Everything loves me." I didn't understand the language, but the meaning touched me. I grew stronger and larger as the army before me withered away. Eventually I could with a mere thought erase them. I had won. I succeeded. The normal external reality started to caress my senses once again in sweeping motions. First came touch, then sound, then finally vision. "Are you back now? What happened?" And I started to feel what my friend was feeling. It felt like being born. My mother was the world in reality, which welcomed me with unconditional love. Everything was beaming with love. The feeling in my body was of total happiness, freedom, and love. Me and the world were the same being. I didn't become one with the world. I was the world, like the world was me. And I loved the world like I now loved myself, and the world loved me just the same. I rapidly regained control of my body, and we decided to go into the garden behind this house. Further away in the forest, I felt how all the trees, animals, the sun, and the sky were radiating love itself. I started to realise that I had been freed of my wounds that I had been carrying for so long. I felt light and in harmony. I was reborn that day. I died and was born again. And the world I was born into is the world as it should be, without being poisoned by the things that had been residing inside me.